Hey guys, welcome back to 4K Motoring. I'm Chris, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about my 2015 Multistrada. Getting into the point of this video, I want to talk a little bit about some of the issues I have with the 2015 Multistrada that I own, and I'll go into a little bit about my hopes of what the V4 Multistrada will bring in terms of fixing these issues. Well, probably the first and most persistent issue I've had with the 2015 Multistrada is the geometry of the front end. And by that I mean this bike at speed is very prone to get a little bit of a head shake going on. I know you can get different steering dampers and stuff like that to control that sort of movement. The way this bike handles around town and at lower speeds is phenomenal. The turns and just agility this bike has, these wide bars, this geometry is great. But when you get up to high speeds, it takes very little and the front end will get a very slight shake to it back and forth. It's pretty easy to control, it generally calms itself back down, but it is definitely there and it's noticeable. Now, when they went up to the 1260 Multistrada, they did some front end geometry changing. They extended the rake out just a little bit more, and that was to solve presumably this issue that people were reporting. So I've ridden one of those and it wasn't nearly as bad as the 2015 was. I'm hoping that the V4 Multistrada has kept that. I assume with a 19-inch front tire and some of the geometry changes they did with the new frame design, I'm sure that was taken into consideration and has been addressed. But that is something that has plagued me on this 2015 since I've had it, and there's really no fix other than getting a new bike with new geometry. So our second big complaint is going to be the Bluetooth system in this 2015 Multistrada. Now, the way this bike came, you were able to pair multiple devices, be it a cell phone, a GPS, multiple rider and passenger phones, headsets, that sort of thing, to the bike. So the way I had it set up, I had my phone paired to the bike, and the bike was then paired to my intercom system. I used Sena initially, then switched to Cardo. That gave me the benefit of being able to see phone calls and text messages coming in, and to respond to music and phone calls, those sort of commands, using the switch gear here on the handlebars that would change function. The problem here was that my cell phone already had the direct ability to communicate with my headset. And moving on to the Cardo Pack Talk Bold series, the voice commands in the helmet, especially with Google and Siri, had made it so you don't even have to press any buttons. And the buttons that you do press either on the headset or what have you are very minimal. So it really wasn't a big deal to not be able to use the switch gear for the buttons. What I found was in bringing the bike in the middle of the phone and the headset communicator, there was a lag. Sometimes the audio dropped out, sometimes it just skipped stuff, there's just a noticeable delay. Some of the talk through from the voice commands in the Cardo unit to the phone were delayed and stalled by that intercom system or by the interference of the Multistrada. So really it didn't serve much purpose. It had the option, but it didn't give you anything to make up for that. So I'm not quite sure why that was included. With the new Multistrada, they have phone connectivity as well, to include a navigation screen that can pop up, at least on the V4s, with a cell phone cubby that I'm told is large enough to fit modern cell phones, but I have a Pixel 6 Pro. I know those that have the iPhone 12 and 13 Pro Max, which is a similar size really, have had issues fitting their phones in that compartment. Not really sure why manufacturers make things for phones that were developed in the early 2000s. We know phones keep getting bigger, so I'm not sure why that doesn't keep expanding. And it sounds like wireless charging is not available on the new Multistrada either, and that just seems like a given at this point that it should be. But my concern therein lies with all the reports of, first off, it has its own proprietary mapping app, the Cygic app, and that requires you to download an additional app to your phone that you don't already have, that you don't already use. It's a mapping software that has some quirks as far as keeping your phone awake and how it interacts with the dashboard, that sort of thing, and what you're able to do with it as far as actually mapping features, as far as communication, preset waypoints, mapping out hazards on the way. It has some issues as far as that goes. Now, I know with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, a lot of manufacturers are going to wireless at this point. I know there's some fees manufacturers have to pay to use those, but honestly, I can't imagine that fee is more than what it costs them to develop their own software. So I'm really confused as to why somebody in this day and age, 2021, 2022, and beyond, would use their proprietary mapping app, which we know is not going to be as good as some of these existing programs, i.e. CarPlay or Android Auto, and we could have just ran with that. So again, it's going to do the same thing where my phone is now connecting, this time via Wi-Fi, to the bike itself and then to my helmet. And I have a suspicion that it's going to be the same story where I'm not going to be getting anything in return for this, and it's only going to be more of a headache. I would imagine I'm still going to resort to putting my phone on the RAM mount or some sort of mounts on the handlebars so I can have maps up running and have direct communication to my helmet, and that solves all of these problems. Most modern phones are waterproof, so that's not a big deal. The Powerlet allows charging adapters to run to the front. The new RAM mounts have wireless charging built into the heads. So I don't really imagine I'm going to be using that center storage section for what they've designed it for a cell phone. I imagine that's still going to be here on the handlebars. I'm still not going to be pairing with the infotainment screen because it's clunky and not really that useful, and it's going to be the same old story. I really hope I'm wrong on this. For those of you that have one of the new V4 Multistradas, I'd love to hear what kind of phones you're using with the bike and what your experience is with the infotainment screen. Hopefully it's better than what the 2015 has been for me. Basically, I just don't use it. I just keep my phone mounted and my headset on, and that's been just fine for me. It solves all the problems that this Ducati creates. My final ongoing gripe is going to be the saddlebag locking mechanism. And I'm going to bring you guys in here so you can hopefully see. So this is the locking mechanism for the saddlebags on the 2015 Multistrada. It's very clean because there's no frame behind this. Allows you to unlock and take the bags off pretty easily. My problem is going to be the actual locking tabs inside. If you can see through that gap, I'm not sure how well it'll show up right through that gap, those two tabs. As I turn the key, they move back and forth. Now my problem with that is I have had debris get into those slots. That locking mechanism that slides back and forth, sand and dirt, some of the more coarse stuff especially, has gotten in them, and that has essentially frozen my saddlebags. It has been quite a pain to get that stuff dislodged enough to be able to open the saddlebags, and when you're going on a trip, especially in a bike that's marketed as an adventure bike, that is a huge oversight, I believe. So I've only had it happen a couple times, but man, it's frustrating when it happens and you think you're locked out of your storage when you get somewhere, and that's not a good feeling. I know I've heard some people say that the new Multistrada has much easier bags to get off than the old one. I don't know how much easier it can get for this 2015 model. With the key in, just turn the key, lift up that center one, slide back, and the bag just comes right off. Again, we have a nice clean look down the side of the bike with no frame. With one hand, we can easily put it in, slide it forward, pops into position, locks that handle down, and take out the key. It's that simple. I'm not sure why some people seem to have problems with this. It works fine. Again, keep it clean. That's going to be the biggest issue with these saddlebags, is that those mechanisms, once they get some dirt in them, they just lock up. Luckily, the list has been really that short as far as things that have been unfixable and just by nature of the bike what it is. Some of the early warranty issues I had with the bike, one of the first one was a fuel mapping issue. Obviously, this is the 2015. It was the first year of this redesign. And I know it's always nice to be an early adopter because you get the new stuff, but there's always a cost of being an early adopter, and that is some of those little fine-tuning things haven't been worked out yet. On cold mornings, when this bike was brand new, when I'd first start the bike, I'd let it warm up for just a little while. When I went to ride it, as soon as I got the RPMs up even a little bit, I'd pull in the clutch, change gears, or come to a stop, and the engine would just die. It would eventually restart, but that was just a fueling issue that needed to be remapped. Brought it in, they reflashed it, I guess it was already a known issue, and had no more fueling issues after that. The most reoccurring issue I've had with this bike is the fuel level sensor. Now this has happened multiple times with this bike that I've had to have the actual fuel level gauge changed. And that has something to do, as I'm told, with the ethanol fuels used here in the US, as opposed to some of the European fuels that I guess don't have that. And some of the plastics they used were not really conducive to that existing a while. There have been several revisions since then, and it seems to have solved the problem. Since I had the last one put in, I really haven't had any more issues, and this last one's been in for now a couple years, which is by far way longer than any of the others, so I think it probably has solved the problem. One of the unintended consequences of the multiple fuel level sensor changes is that the quick connect fitting on top of the fuel pump, right under this fairing here, I guess had eroded, or just from taking it on and off so many times, had formed a weak seal. And one day while riding not far from the house, the actual fuel line came off the top of the fuel pump, and it just started spewing gasoline all up everywhere, all over me, all over the bike. Luckily, it was pretty soon after riding, the bike wasn't too hot. I was able to shut it down and move it over. No adverse condition really occurred. The bike didn't catch fire. Some of the plastics got a little bit oxidized, which I was able to take care of afterwards and clean back up. That was definitely a risky sort of move. It could have ended in disaster for this bike. Luckily it didn't, and to date that has been the only issue, knock on wood, that has kept me on the side of the road, or left me on the side of the road with this bike. It has been super reliable otherwise, but that is just something to keep in mind on these early year model bikes, and something I'm hoping, given how well the latest sensor in this has worked, I'm hoping that's something that they don't have an issue with anymore, especially not on the new V4. I'd be very disappointed to hear of anything like that. All in all, guys, I really have loved this bike. It has been amazing for me since I've had it in 2015, now going on 7 years, I guess. It has been awesome. Nearly 35,000 miles on it. It has been just amazing. Everything about it, the electronic suspension, the power, the different ride modes that truly do change, the geometry, I mean everything on this bike, it has held up well. It has been pretty remarkable, and by far the best motorcycle I've ever owned. The Multistrada is one of those all-rounder bikes. It's truly meant to do it all, and at least my experience with the 1200s, it really does. I'm looking forward to going ahead and finding one of the V4s's for sale. Hopefully my local dealership can get one in before too long so I can check it out and hopefully make that swap happen. The one thing that is concerning me a little bit, I plan on doing a little bit more detailed video on this later, but is the fuel economy. I know some people are saying now that that bike, the V4s, is getting broken in, they're getting a little bit more range out of it. But this bike, I'm able to get 200 to 250 miles out of a tank on highway trips without worry. And for some long distance stuff, that is essential. So I'm really curious how well this V4s is going to do. For adding 10 additional horsepower and a couple foot-pounds of torque, it shouldn't be a whole lot thirstier than this bike, I wouldn't think. For those of you that have already commented and let me know how yours has been, I really do appreciate it. For the rest of you that have the new V4 Multistradas, I'd love to hear the kind of fuel economy that you're actually seeing on a daily basis, and to know how many miles you're really able to get out of that tank if you push it. And that's really going to guide my choices here going forward. Well guys, that's all I have for you today. Again, I'm Chris. You've been watching 4K Motoring. Certainly appreciate you guys checking this video out. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe for future content. Hopefully we'll be getting the V4 Multistrada before too long. I'd love to bring you guys along that journey and let you know how it really turns out for me. I do appreciate you guys watching, and until next time, stay tuned.